Hello.
Welcome back to Historia.
I'm Kylie.
I'm Jamie.
And we are at you for part 2 of King George III.
Georgie George.
Good old Georgie George. Good old Georgie boy.
Okay.
Yeah. His life is about to get messy. Poor thing.
Poor thing. I mean, what a time.
Yeah. It really was a time. So, should I just jump in?
Let's do it.
Okay. If you missed last week's, go listen to that first. It's all about a lot of things. Kind of bouncing back and forth of the beginning of his reign, when he goes crazy, what's going on with the world at that time. There's a lot of information. So go listen to that first. I left off with him becoming dangerously ill. Mm-hmm. And that's where we were. So we're going to talk about it. Okay. Anyway, let's just get into it. So he actually ended up healing the first time he got really sick. So it all started to kind of go away. Like, yeah, he still had mental disorders forever, but they weren't as intense as they were in that moment. So they started to go away. He was able to kind of get back in the game. Be like, okay, we got this. Now, George was known to be a very controlling father, and a lot of people think that have like researched his life, they think that it's because he lost his dad at a young age. And so he feels the need to like make up for that.
Yeah.
Basically. And so he was always really hard on his sons, but he loved his daughters and he wasn't very hard on them, of course, but like his sons, he was always really hard on them.
High expectations.
Right. So he always made it a point to teach a lesson, and just make sure that like every interaction he had with them was like, they got something from it. So, but unfortunately, he did put a lot of pressure on his kids, and he did put his daughters in a nunnery so that they wouldn't marry foreign princes. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So they were forced to stay in isolation. So yes, he loved them, but I guess that was pretty bad thing to do.
Did he just not want them married?
He wanted them to just marry the right person. So like he would have like people visit them.
Yeah.
If there was like a good, I don't know, somebody who would be good for them to marry, but they just didn't want them to like meet someone who's foreign and like change the family line.
Oh God.
I'm like, Jesus Christ. So yeah, that was a good way of meeting men, you know, just lock them up in a room.
Oh God.
Oh, they eventually did. He would just bring men to them and be like, do you like it? Huh?
Oh God.
It was probably more like, here's your husband.
Yeah.
You're released.
Yeah.
But anyway, George was a lot different than his grandfather, George II, and his dad in ruling because he got more involved in the government than they did. He was just very like involved in what was going on. He got into a lot of issues because he wanted to be the one who like spoke on those things and he didn't want to shy away from it.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a title to him. He took his job very seriously. He also took losing the American colonies very personally and was really hard on himself for it. And he was like, this is all my fault. And the Americans saw him as a tyrant. They're like, nice try. So, but he stayed popular and liked by his own people. The Britons loved him. They were like, he's great because he was like doing good things for them for the most part. So one of his passions, I mentioned it earlier in the first episode, was architecture. So he was really into like coming up with ideas. He didn't actually like build them, but he came up with the ideas of like, this is what I want. I want this to be a renovation in the room. And he also got into gardening. He just had so many skills.
It's great for your mental health.
If he was a sim, he would have lots of skills. So he had created a palace in Richmond, and he commissioned an architect named James Wyatt to build a Gothic castle at Kew. Many of his buildings and creative projects were abandoned when his mental illness got worse. So he had a lot of projects that he started but never finished because he just like couldn't focus on it. Or he just like let someone else finish it for him. that seems to be the case for most of them, unfortunately.
No.
I know. In 1788, even his doctors were like, I don't know how to help you. Like, because he was like getting over it. It was getting better, but it was still there. And they were like, you have these weird episodes. Like, we just don't know how to give you the support you need.
Yeah.
Again, we're not scientifically advanced yet. We don't have the medicines. We don't have the people who were trained to be able to like understand what's going on. So this was just a lot for them because they want to help him, but they just don't know how. So he had a lot of stomach disorders. His metabolism kept racing. He was losing a lot of weight, and then randomly he would gain a lot of weight. And then he would just become delirious.
Oh, God.
Yeah, and just zone out. So he would say nonsense, and he would talk very quickly. Me too. The ministers removed him out of the public eye to the queue. They were like, okay, this is embarrassing. Like, he needs to stay away from the public. And he forgot many of the words that he was saying. Like, he would start a sentence and then just stop talking.
So he probably has some sort of dementia.
That's what a lot of people think he had, was dementia. He was also confused a lot of the time. He's just like, I don't know what's going on. Yeah. When it got really bad, he could barely stand up without falling over, and he foamed at the mouth, and sometimes he even got violent. So he had all kinds of things. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
So the government was already planning on his heir. They're like, okay, your son, George, King George IV, he's going to take over soon because you are probably going to remain in this condition, and this is not a good condition to be in.
Yeah.
So his doctors were at a loss. They called in a famous mad doctor, that's what he was known to be, named Francis Wills, and he was a leader in mental health treatment. He was very like ahead of the time. He was like the best of the best. Like, if he couldn't figure it out, nobody could, basically. He gave brutal treatment, but it did help the king recover for a while. It helped him like get in good shapes. I don't know what he gave him. But he seemed to be okay. But you'll notice there's just like these off and on periods in his life where it's like bad, and then it's okay, and then it's like bad again and okay, which is really interesting because it's like, I wonder what he had to where like it could come and go like that.
Yeah,
it's just fascinating. But many now think that he had a rough case of bipolar disorder. But again, I don't think it would just be bipolar disorder.
It was probably many things.
Yeah.
Especially depending on how old he was at this point.
Yeah, this is like, I don't know. I think he's getting to his 50s.
Yeah.
Or he's already in his 50s. So yeah, he's getting up there in age, for sure.
Could be the gross water they drink too.
Yeah. So Queen Charlotte stayed devoted to him through all of it. And she was just like, I'm not going to give up on him. Like, I'll be here for him. And their kids would, you know, do what they can to take care of him and different things like that. So let's move back on to what's going on in the world. In 1780, there's more war. Woo! Just what we need. And of course, there's always drama with France. We have the French Revolutionary War, which is a conflict between Britain and France that would go on for 23 more years.
Good Lord.
Can't read. So George placed his faith in William Pitt as head of his government for 20 years. So he's like, I trust you. You can do this. And that was the younger, William Pitt the younger.
Yeah.
So the next few decades consisted of France becoming bigger and stronger. They're like, roar. You're not that intimidating, France. Many started making peace with France, like Austria and Prussia, but England refused until the Republic was defeated. They're like, no way. And then a big part of that was because of King George. He's like, I'm not giving in to them.
Yeah.
Britain had many more fights with France, and they just had a lot of battles. I'm not going to write them all down. You can go read about them for hours if you want. But I was like, I'm not going to.
It's a never-ending war.
It is, yeah. So, of course, we have Napoleon. Oh,
Nappy Boy.
Go listen to our episodes on Nappy Boy, where we have like 4 of them.
Yeah.
5 of them.
4. So
if you want to hear his whole story, go listen to those. I'm not going to like explain his story. I'm just going to mention him here and there.
He's a wild man.
Yeah. So Nappy Boy, Napoleon Bonaparte, was known to George and the Britons as their enemy. Bonaparte brought the French Republic to an end in 1804 and became the Emperor of France, as we know.
It's not a monarchy.
Yeah. Ugh. So that's Nappy Boy. He's just messing everything up on that end and, pissing everyone off.
As he did every single time. He would get alliances and then he would get enemies.
Yeah, he's like, okay, how can I ruin this alliance?
Literally, he ruined it himself.
Yeah. It's like, come on, buddy.
He's like, oh, we're friends. Let's do something shady.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. So now let's talk about Ireland. Oh, good old Ireland. Now, Ireland remained a problem this whole time. Although I haven't really talked about them much because I'm really just focused on like King George's influence with everything. They've been a problem this whole time. And the majority of the population in the beginning of Ireland was Roman Catholic. Mm-hmm. So the island was almost actually lost between the 1590s and 1690s, which is crazy to think about. But then the Protestants began dominating Ireland, and the Parliament was going against the Catholics and the Scottish Presbyterians. They crushed the political opposition for a lot of the 18th century through violence and unrest. They're like, we are here. It's always religion, I feel like. It always has to start.
It always has been.
It's like we can never separate it. It can never just be its own thing.
Nope.
So we're still like that.
Literally.
That's a sad part. Anyway, so now Ireland had a rebellion with France in 1798. And the Republican Revolutionary Group was leading with France's support. So there was the Rebellion of 1798, good old times, which caused a major uprising against the British rule. They're like, we're going to get you Britons. And then they're like, we're going to get you Irish creepers. I don't know. Catholic people. They're not all Catholics, but anyway. So in 2 weeks, just 2 weeks, tens of thousands of British troops gone. And they also lost thousands of irregular militia troops. They all died, got killed. I'm like, good job. So the militia troops started seceding and suppressing the rebellion before Ireland could be turned into an area for the French to attack the Britain. Basically, they just kind of used it as their fighting space. Yeah. Britain had a great loss in that battle because they lost a lot of troops. And so they're like, we don't want to repeat that again. We need to like change our ways. So they ended up taking a lot of the penal laws about Catholicism away because that's really what caused it. They were pissed off about them wanting to come in and change everything.
Yeah.
In January of 1801, the Irish Parliament was ended because of the Act of Union. George was granted the new title of King of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. That's his whole title. I'm like, oh my God. So he's the king of both places. There was brief peace from 1802 to 1803, but the Third Coalition began when Britain declared war on France in May 1803. They don't want to give up. So they allied with Austria, Russia, Naples, Sicily, and Sweden in the strongest coalition France had ever faced before. The Battle of... Didn't you talk about the Battle of Austerlitz? I don't know how to pronounce it. Austerlitz? Austerlitz?
Yes.
You talked about that in the episode, right?
Yes.
I don't remember all the things that you talked about. I think you talked about the Battle of Austerlitz in the Napoleon episodes.
I think I did.
Anyway, there's the Battle of Austerlitz where Napoleon led victory in December 1805 against Austria and Russia. Yeah, you would have talked about that.
I did.
Yeah. It's hard to remember those things.
Oh my
back
God,
then.
there's so many.
That was a while ago. So the coalition ended in 1806 when France added Naples to its collection and broke a lot of the Austrian control over a lot of Germany. They're just becoming more powerful and growing. In 1809, Bonaparte had taken many more areas for France, and control over Europe was made clear when an Austrian attempt to resist French control of Central Europe was quickly defeated. Napoleon's only enemy remained as King George and Great Britain. Everybody else was kind of like falling for France and like going in that area. They probably still hated him, but like...
Oh, 100%.
His biggest enemy was Great Britain.
Well, he was a narcissist.
Yeah. He knew how to trap him. Mm-hmm. Britain is still the strongest naval power in the world at this point, so we have to think of that. That's not going to go away. They're still taking over the seas. And so there was a big amount of destruction caused by Britain at the Battle of Trafalgar off the coast of Spain in 1805. This caused much of France's fleet to be ruined, so they tried to go out there. They tried to fight back. Mm-hmm. it did not go well. And so this ensured a land invasion of Britain could not now be undertaken by the French. So in late 1806, Napoleon tried to bring the British to their knees. He's like, please. And he imposed a massive blockade on trade. He's like, good luck.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, good old Nappy Boy. Between Great Britain and the continental Europe. This was very effective. Obviously, you need stuff, right? So if you're putting a blockade on it, it's like, it's going to happen next. And of course, King George is like, oh, come on, we need stuff. He was probably, no, yeah, he was German. He was probably like that. He probably had another mad episode after learning about that. Russia remained the back door for trade for Britons. They just kept using Russia. I like how Russia's just kind of like in the middle, just like,
Russia don't give a fuck.
Yeah, they're just like, I'm just here to like chill. If you can give us money, that's fine. So Britain kept the fight against the French alive. The front being opened by the British. There was a big front that was open, and Napoleon lost a lot of his troops and resources starting in 1807. So it was just like a bunch of chaos. This was a good way to end George's reign because this was right before everything went downhill and he started losing his mind forever, basically. And so there were strong impacts of Britain during George's reign. I just wanted to mention a few other things besides war that happened during his reign because there were a lot of things that he really influenced and he really pushed. So first things first, it was during the time that the Industrial Revolution began in Britain. So we had different inventions happening. Everything was just becoming more advanced. And he really pushed for that. He wanted people to be able to like learn about different things and try out different things. We had the spinning jenny that was invented, which helped with the production instead of like sitting there and having to like sew everything. This was just a quicker way to do it. Soon they were powered by engines. So he put a lot of funding into those types of things too. Well, we had power steam engines that were now being used starting in 1781, which was another thing he pushed. That we had more efficient, Great Britain. They had better farming because George had a big interest in helping the agriculture. So he actually gained the nickname Farmer George, which I love.
E-I-E-I-O.
That's funny. On that farm, he had 16 mental breakdowns.
Oh my god. E-I-E-I-O.
With a nappy boy there. Nappy boy here. Oh my god. Anyway, it gives me like looking at a picture of King George and then hearing Farmer George. They just don't go well. No. You imagine like a hillbilly and then you see him and you're like, just funny. He also, of course, wanted mental health to be more talked about. He wanted just health in general to be better. And so he put a lot of his time and energy and money into medicine so that people could work on that, mechanics and engineering. Those were all things. He had a big interest in astronomy and clocks, and he valued growth in those as well. He tried to open a lot of jobs that could kind of go with those things. May not have worked for a while, but
it takes time.
Yeah. And then another big thing was vaccinations. So in the 1790s, there were vaccines that were being tested against smallpox because at this point they were losing 400,000 people each year in Europe. Not fun. And so a person actually came up with the idea of giving them cowpox instead. So like you basically give them a shot and it infects them with cowpox because they're still going to get sick, but they're not going to get the same effects as what smallpox would give them.
Well, yeah, because smallpox would cause severe scarring, especially if you got it on your face.
Oh,
yeah. It was not pretty if you survived it.
And like it was very rare if you did.
Yeah.
But with cowpox, if you got cowpox, then you're now immune to smallpox. So they're like, well, you just have to go through this first, and then you're not going to have to deal with smallpox. So this vaccine started being pushed, and the king and queen, they were both totally for it and trying to convince people to push it, basically. They even gave it to their children to test it out. So they believed in it. They were like, yeah, this is going to work. I bet the kids were like forced against their will, but still.
Oh, 100%.
So yeah, he was a big supporter of different things, and he had a lot of passions. Medical revolution was just a big one of his. He wanted everyone to be able to like survive different things that come up in life. And then, of course, we have the slave trade. So the British had large number of trades, and there were a lot of slaves, obviously. If you've ever heard about the slave trade, it's a lot. Not going to go into detail about that, but in Britain, there were many abolitionists who wanted to end slavery immediately, and George was one of them. He was a big abolitionist. He wanted slavery to be done, like, which is really interesting because I feel like a lot of leaders didn't feel that way because they got to have slaves. Like, they got to have someone, you know, to help them out. So it's really interesting to, like, hear his perspective, how, like, he was just like, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
He actually said this, that slavery was indefensible and unethical. And so he favored abolitionism. He pushed it as much as he could. And he tried to abolish the slave trade during his reign. But in 1807, the Slave Trade Act was signed by George, which prohibited the transport of slaves from Africa on British ships. However, you could still have slaves.
Yeah.
So now they can't, like, enter in, but, like, they can in other ways.
There's so many loopholes.
Right. So this obviously isn't the final step. In 1833, that would be when the Slavery Abolition Act was effectively prohibited throughout the British Empire. So it took until 1833, which he's already dead by then. So
still further ahead than the U.S.
Yep. Oh my God.
By at least almost 40 years.
Yeah, that is sad.
That's very sad.
So, yeah. But anyway, another big thing about him was just that how he did not favor slaves. He's like, that's not cool.
Interesting.
Yeah. He also helped with contributing to the cultural and intellectual life of Great Britain and England. He just wanted to do anything he could to make life better there. In 1753, there was a British museum that opened, and George was committed to adding on to the library there. And so he created one of the finest libraries ever created by one man, and it's actually called the King's Library. It's still there. So he like gathered as many texts as he possibly could, thousands of texts, and it's at the British Library in London. If you ever go there, there's like an area when you first walk in, you see like the glass wall, and it's just full of books.
Oh,
that's
cool.
His library. Yeah, that's really cool that they preserve that. But yeah, he was known to be like the first one to ever create his own library. Mm-hmm. So in 1762, you know, he loves art. Okay, so he's like, I'm going to get my hands on some art. So when he became king, that was one of his focuses too. He was like, I'm going to get a bunch of art. So he purchased a large collection of Italian artwork and brought them to London to the Buckingham Palace. And a lot of it is still there today.
Of course it is. They don't want to give that shit up.
I know. Not anymore. George helped the Royal Academy of Arts be established in 1768, giving it a lot of funds. And then in 1807, there was a big invasion of Britons to France called the Spanish Ulcer. I don't like the word ulcer.
It is very
It stresses me out. And France completely ran out of resources. In 1812, France launched the invasion of Russia, and there were armies of France that were destroyed from the intense Russian winter. Oh, Russia winters. So just to kind of give you the idea, France is having a downfall. And King George is just losing his mind. He doesn't know what's going on. And then 1813 and 1814, the Russians, the Prussians, and Austrians rolled back all of Napoleon's conquisitions. I don't know what I wrote. But they basically kind of destroyed his plans for the last 15 years, kind of going back in time.
His whole legacy.
Yeah. They're like, nah. And of course, when this happened, this was big news for Britain because they found out France lost, and then King George just lost his mind at this point. He didn't even know. Yeah. They told the news to him, and he was just like blank. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, a few years ago, that would have meant a lot to you.
Yeah.
So as you can see, he was very influential, but by the mid-1810s, George was not in a good enough state of mind to celebrate the victory over France. He wasn't in a good state of mind at all, really. Everything started getting bad again. His son, George IV, and George III lost a strong relationship by the 1790s. They didn't see eye to eye. They just never really had a bond.
That sucks.
Yeah. His favorite son, Duke of York, was guilty of selling military commissions.
Oh my God.
So you're going to see all these things that his kids did in like the span of 2 years. Okay, there was that.
God.
And then his favorite daughter, Amelia, got sick. That was his youngest daughter. And then there was another scandal of potential murder from another one of his sons that happened.
Oh my God.
And then George had 10 more years of madness. And he just started getting crazier. He had his last public appearance at the Windsor Castle on October 25th, 1810, when his golden jubilee was marked. And then his daughter Amelia died a week later.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty sad. So right after he was able to celebrate 50 years on the throne, his illness returned after 1810, and he became blind. Like, he was pretty much fully blind at this point, which a lot of people think tied to amnesia or dementia. So he was also losing his hearing day by day, but his vision was gone. So yeah, a lot of people were just like, oh, he's just sad that his daughter died. He'll be fine. Like, I don't think that's what happens when you're sad, but okay. And so his symptoms were worse than ever now. There were no effective treatments for what he had, and George could not continue to be king. There's just no way. First of all, like, I'm surprised that his grandfather was able to rule blind, but like, how do you do that? And then if you know that it's not going to get better.
It's like, you gotta know when to throw the towel in.
Right. So on February 7th, 1811, there was an act of parliament that was passed, and the Regency government was established. They're basically trying to come up with a backup plan because they know that he will probably die soon. And so George IV acted as regent until his father would recover or die. There's two options. He's either going to recover and be fine, or he's going to be like this until he dies.
Could be a push to get rid of him.
Right. He's like, don't take your medicine, Dad.
Oh, God.
Everyone thought that the king would recover over time. Like, they wanted to believe the best out of it, especially because, like, Britain loved him.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, he's been the best king we've ever had. Like, we can't lose him. So they were holding on to hope, but unfortunately, it did not happen. His condition was getting worse and worse by the day, and the last 10 years of his reign, he played no role in public life. So he ended up living another 10 years on the reign. He was reigning for 60 years total, which is crazy. Yeah. But at the last 10 years, he didn't really do anything because he couldn't. And so the 1810s are known as the Regency period. It's like a waiting period. Like, what's going to happen next? The king and queen finally separated because she actually wrote him a letter, and it was really cute. But I'm like, did someone read it to him? Because he can't read it.
Yeah.
But basically, she was just describing, like, she wishes that they didn't have to be apart, but she needs to do what's best for her and the kids. Because at this point, like, she doesn't know who he is anymore. It's just really sad. So if you want to read that letter, it's obviously in better, like, English than what I just said. But, yeah, it's just her talking about her love for him and how she wishes that this wasn't happening.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you see their genuine love for each other. I'm just like, oh. So she was living in the Windsor Castle with the kids. And a lot of their kids at this point had significant others. They were married. But none of them had children yet.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so Queen Charlotte is just like, guys, come on, let's have kids. Let's go. Because she knows that they're getting up there in age. And she's like, I want to be able to at least see a grandkid, but also we need to establish the heir pretty quick.
Yeah.
So, oh yeah, one of their daughters, Princess Charlotte, I think it was their first daughter, if I remember right, she died giving birth to a stillborn baby in 1817. Yeah. So that would have been the first one. But unfortunately, neither of them made it. So now there was a baby race between Prince William and Prince Edward.
Oh.
Yeah. But it ended up being somebody else who won. The Duke of Kent won. Wow. That was a shocker. And so they produced a princess who would grow up to be Queen Victoria. So, and she was a pretty big one too. George was usually completely unaware of what was going on around him.
Yeah.
His kids would visit him. He just wouldn't realize what's going on. Basically, his personality's gone. He's just like nothing. But he still played music, which I kind of like. He's still playing his flute.
I mean, it was probably like muscle memory at that point of
right.
just like knowing.
Yeah. Right. It's just like the songs he maybe has played a lot or something. Mm-hmm. They got to a point where nobody was allowed to visit him anymore just because of how crazy he got. When people would come, he would get really scared. Mm-hmm. And so he just lived by himself for the last few years, and he just talked to himself all day.
Oh.
I know. So he continued playing music as much as he could, but then he got to a point where he was just like, meh, can't do anything. Charlotte ended up dying in 1818 in the courtyard, and they actually put I think they put hay around his room so that he wouldn't hear them when they moved her to go to her funeral, because they didn't want him to freak out. I don't know if he would have even remembered what's going on or
Probably
understood,
not. Yeah.
but he never knew that she died.
It was precaution.
Right.
How did he outlive her?
I know. Isn't that shocking? It was only by 2 years, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is shocking. I think she got sick pretty quick, if I remember right.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that woman, she lived a life. She had so many children.
Yeah, no kidding.
So George died peacefully in 1820 after 60 years of reigning as king.
That's wild.
At the time, he was the longest serving monarch England or Great Britain had ever seen. But Queen Victoria actually reigned longer than him. So his granddaughter, she would reign from 1837 to 1901.
Damn.
Yeah. So today, because he was known so much with his architecture, there are a lot of places in the palace that he created that are still existing. But they've changed them a lot, and they don't really coincide with him at all and his ideas.
Yeah.
But there is one room in the Kew Palace that remains that was restored as the king's room. And they basically finished it how he wanted it to be before he lost his mind.
Oh.
So that's King George III.
That's so devastating.
Yeah.
To go through all that.
I know. It just makes me sad. Because that's why I wanted to research him, because I'm just to be known as the Mad King when he did other things, and he
yeah,
he was very influential to the Britons. I don't know. I'm curious to see what perspectives people have that live there in that area, if they talk about him or how they feel about him now.
Well, I'm sure. Well, they probably go through all that history too.
Yeah,
that's their history,
right?
Whereas we go through U.S. history,
all the presidents and all that.
Oh my god, it is so boring. There's nothing interesting going on.
But it's interesting because in Hamilton they make him the funny character.
Really?
Yeah, they make him the comedic relief because he's he's kind of like the narrator. He sings 3 songs, but he'll just come in and be like, this is happening next. It's the first song he's saying, everyone's leaving Britain to go to France. You'll be back. So that's why it's called You'll Be Back. He's just really sassy and just makes his remarks once in a while. But anyway, that's what inspired me to research him. And I'm glad I did, because I do feel he is misunderstood. And it is sad when you're only known for your downfall and not the things you did.
That is probably the most devastating part, especially a lot of leaders or just important people in life, is that you only remember about the bad things that they did or the good things, but you forget about the middle piece of it.
Right. Yeah. He was reigning during a time that was really difficult.
Yeah.
A lot of changes. And I think that could have caused him to go a little crazy. That could have caused a lot of mental disorders. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, all that stress. I can't imagine.
Yeah. So I think he suffered with a lot of different things. I don't think it was just one thing.
And it could be other genetic stuff too that nobody was aware of that could have happened with previous rulers that just died younger. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to tell. We have scientists and historians now, but it's just unless you were there.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get that information out unless it was completely documented. But even with old documents like that, you have to take with a grain of salt. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
I like that. I like that one.
There we go.
Yeah. where can you find us?
You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Historia the Podcast. You can also email us at historiathepodcast@gmail.com.
Oh.
We will talk to you next week. We're doing something. I don't know. We'll find out.
It's really good.
I don't know what Jamie's talking about. But she says it kind of has to deal with, not like mine, but like something similar-ish.
Very similar.
Okay. We'll find out.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.